Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host, and we're going to have another fascinating conversation today. You know, making changes to reduce your environmental impact around the house is straightforward. You can eat less meat. You can reduce the purchases of single-use plastic and turn down the thermostat by a few degrees to make a difference. But when you go online, there aren't many obvious choices to cut your impact. Consider this. A single web search produces about 0.2 grams of CO2, and the site CO2 estimates that Google emits about 1,100 pounds of CO2 every second, or 30 tons a minute. Your streaming video habit generates about 1/10 of a pound of CO2 each hour. So how do you reduce your digital life's environmental impact? Enter Ecosia, a nonprofit search engine that plants trees when you search. It's our preferred search site at Earth911, and the organization has already planted, get this, 143 million trees. You can watch the tree planting add up at Ecosia.org. And by the way, they add about a tree a second. So it's pretty cool to watch the forest restore itself. Our guest today is Christian-Kroll, the founder of Ecosia. He started the company in 2009 after seeing the devastating impact of deforestation firsthand while traveling after graduating from college. The company was also the first benefit or B Corporation in Germany. While the search engine does produce CO2, the trees planted offset more emissions than Ecosia.org creates. They estimate that the trees planted result in a per search reduction in CO2 of about 2.2 pounds. To put that in context, Ecosia estimates that if it had the same volume of searches as Google, it could plant enough trees to remove 15% of humanity's annual CO2 emissions. So let's talk about Ecosia's sustainability plans, how it's going to reduce its operational footprint, and where and how they plant trees, as well as the potential for a restorative tech economy. You can search and plant a tree by visiting ecosia.org. Welcome to the show, Christian. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Well, like I said, we use Ecosia as our search engine here at Earth911. But most people don't think about starting a technology company as a way to plant trees. How did this idea come to you, and what did it take to launch the company?
Yeah, so for me personally, it was, I finished college. I studied business administration. During my studies, I was always interested in the technology world. But for some reason, I didn't just want to take a normal career path. I wanted to do something different, something more meaningful. And I actually took almost 1 year off and traveled around the world. So I spent half a year living in Nepal, and then actually almost another year in South America. Living there, I really observed that a lot of things aren't so great on our planet, that a lot of people don't have the same opportunities as I did. And also that there's a lot of destruction happening. And that was the year 2007. That was also the first time that I found out about climate change. And I wanted whoa, why has nobody told me about this at college? So I realized this and basically decided to make it my life's mission. But also I wanted to work in technology and have a startup and so on. So, and that's basically then how the two things came together. So that's, I knew Google existed. Their business model was very successful. So I thought, why not do kind of a Google that plants trees? And this is how Ecosia was born in the end.
Now you did a couple of versions of this startup before you cracked the nut. What was the secret to making this work?
I think persistence, maybe. The first 2 attempts didn't really work out. The sites didn't really work. We didn't manage to attract enough people to actually use it. And then only Ecosia was the 3rd attempt. So that then worked out. I was fortunate enough to basically have some time while I was traveling. So I could, try a few times. But I think also, especially now that we're growing quite a lot, what is helping is that more and more people are aware of the problem of the climate crisis. So that also helps. So more people are looking for easy things that they can do, and that helps us a lot to attract users.
About how many people use the site on a monthly basis?
So we have around 15 million people using Ecosia every month. Quite a lot. Not as big as Google, but we're getting there.
progress takes time. And as you point out, persistence is important to getting anything off the ground. And in the tech industry, we're surprisingly tolerant of having not succeeded. It actually, you learn something and you apply it to the next one. You keep at it, it can work. Now, your site estimates that the average cost per tree is about 25 cents. Where are you planting the trees, and what kind of trees are you finding are the most effective carbon sinks?
Yeah, so we plant trees around the planet, I would say. So most of our tree planting projects, we have, I think, more than 30 now. Most of them are located in the tropics in developing countries, because there is where you get the biggest bang for your buck. So basically, the biggest impact for every dollar that you invest. Also, the biggest CO2 reductions are basically happening in the tropics, where trees grow much, much faster. Mm-hmm. But then also, we're not only looking at CO2 reductions, but we're also looking at the impact that the trees can have on the society, on biodiversity, on the water cycle. So trees are really kind of magic tools that we have to fix a lot of our world's problems. And we're looking at this holistically. And there might be maybe projects also where a tree is more expensive, but the benefits for society are so great that we're still doing those projects as well.
That's interesting. So, taking into account the full environmental and social impact of the tree, there's a lot more than the 25 cents of expense. There's a lot of value that comes back out of it. Now, one of the things that I have frequently been challenged on when talking about trees is the idea that consumers want the trees to be planted near them. Do you find that is something people actually want, or when they understand that you get the bigger bang for the buck in the tropics, for instance, are they perfectly okay with the fact they're planted anywhere in the world?
Yeah, I think I also understand that need, because we are humans and we want to touch the things that we contribute to, or at least be able to relate. And we have a few tree planting projects also in the countries where most of our users coming from, so the United States, Germany, France, for example. But yeah, actually, most of our money then goes to developing countries, because also in those countries, often there's really no budget for tree planting. Like countries like the United States or Germany, they could easily finance all the tree planting they wanted and basically replant all of their forests with their own power, economic power that they have. But in other countries, that's not the case. But still, we also have a few projects that are close by to our user base, because first of all, people always still ask, are you really planting trees? And then they can basically go and visit some of our projects. And then I think it's true that we need to put most of our money into the tropics, but then, or into developing countries in the tropics, but then trees still need to be planted also in the developed world. Like there has been massive deforestation in the United States, for example, right. And that's causing a lot of problems, wildfires, for example. So there are a lot of problems to fix as well, and we want to get some attention on that as well.
So when you factor in the socioeconomic benefits, what are you considering? Job creation, restoration of economic opportunity, like the restoration of a fisheries. What are you looking at?
Yeah, so it's difficult to kind of measure that exactly, but jobs created, for example, is something that you can measure pretty easily. And then also, what often happens is that the trees actually improve the soil quality so that people can then also do agriculture. We have one project in Senegal, for example, where we work with smallholder farmers where they plant trees on their land, and that increases their income by 400%. Mm-hmm. So, and that is a massive improvement. And yeah, those kind of things we take into account. And it's not only the financial income, but they then also, that knowledge then exists. How can people help themselves? How can they build a better future for themselves? So we want to make sure that this knowledge also spreads. So basically the scalability of projects, we're looking at that. But then, people are not the only part. Also, biodiversity is super important. So we're planting, or we're trying to focus on areas that are biodiversity hotspots. So areas where there's a lot of biodiversity loss, a lot of deforestation, but super important areas to preserve and protect. And you can best do that. You can best protect a forest basically by giving people opportunities to make an alternative income. So you can actually plant trees to protect other trees. So that's what we're also taking into account. tree planting is really, I think you have to take a lot of things into account. And if you focus only on one metric, then you're doing something suboptimal.
Well, you're also seeking to reduce Ecosia's environmental footprint directly. And I wanted to ask not just what you're doing, but do you see it a possibility of creating a green tech economy? Can we really do that?
Yeah, actually, so we're not even aiming at reducing our footprint, but we want to maximize our footprint. We're already way beyond the stage where we're just carbon neutral. So you mentioned the 0.2 grams of CO2 that a normal surge emits. And we kind of produce all the electricity that we need for our surges. We produce that ourselves with renewable energy. So we're basically balancing that. But at the same time, we have 1 kilogram, so more than 2 pounds per surge that is absorbed from the atmosphere thanks to our tree planting. So actually our impact is already massively positive. And this is what I think actually, is super exciting. It's not something where you are just sustainable or you're reducing your impact, but you're actually regenerating. You're actually creating, like when you do a search with Ecosia, you actually leave the world, make the world better, basically. And I think that's a very, very important transformation that we as a society also need to go through. Mm-hmm. So it's not important that we just become CO2 neutral. That's, I think, not ambitious enough. Everybody needs to think like, what is the maximum that I can do? How can I be really climate positive? And that's not only true for individuals, but also for companies. We have big companies like the tech companies that have hundreds of billions of dollars lying around on their bank accounts, and they could use that money really to help solve climate change. And I think in times like this, in times of a climate crisis, that's even their obligation. So if you have the means, then I think you should really do more than just being CO2 neutral.
Well, so let's unpack that a little bit. On the one hand, you do generate some carbon. Maybe not directly from the search because you're using renewable energy, but your organization's activities, their scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, for instance. And then you can offset it. A lot of people are critical of the idea of offsetting because there is still emissions going on. But as you point out, we have to go past carbon neutrality to carbon positive and start absorbing this in order to get back to where we were in terms of CO2 levels prior to the industrial era, when they were about 350 parts per million or less, perhaps down as low as 280. We're at 419 right now. There's a lot of CO2 to take out of the environment. Is offsetting a permanent feature of our tech economy, or is that something that we would ultimately not even need to do because we're no longer generating any carbon and are back to pre-industrial levels? I mean, is that kind of a dream scenario possible?
Yeah, offsetting is definitely a complicated topic. I think so. In my opinion, if offsetting is used as an excuse to basically not do all the effort that is needed to really reduce your footprint, then I think that's not a good thing. I think first of all, everybody individually, but also all companies should do whatever they can to really reduce their emissions. And then whenever they kind of reach the maximum that is possible, then offsetting, I think, is a good way to actually take care of the rest, whatever you can't reduce. Because it is providing finance for great tree planting projects, for example, or other regenerative projects. And those projects, if it wasn't for the offsetting money, wouldn't be financed at the moment. Unfortunately, there's not enough finance going into those kind of projects that we are supporting. So that's why I think it's actually, if it's done right, it's a good thing. But there also, I would say, why stop at zero? There's no reason to stop at zero. Everybody could spend a few $1,000s a year, if you're an individual, on buying carbon credits and actually really becoming climate positive. And also companies that have a lot of money, why should you stop at zero? There's no reason for that. And we also at Ecosia, we're not stopping at zero. We're like, I don't know how many million tons of CO2 we already took out of the atmosphere.
Well, and it's important to think about reducing your footprint and offsetting, and think as a systemic approach to living your life better. For instance, I do spend quite a bit of money planting trees and doing carbon removal. How many searches does it take for you to plant a tree?
Yeah, that's a little bit difficult to say because it really depends on where you're located and also how often you're clicking on advertisements, for example. So what your behavior as a user is. On average, it's roughly 50 searches that then contributes to one tree planted. And I personally do dozens of searches a day, and that means thousands of searches a year. So you can really, by using Ecosia as your default search engine, create your small own little forest over time and really have also a significant CO2 removal at the same time. If every search removes 1 kilogram of CO2, that adds up to quite a lot.
So you actually show a little counter when you visit the site, and I clear my cookies regularly. So I don't think you actually have my actual number, but since December, the last time I did that, I've searched 557 times. So roughly 10 trees is what you're saying. Can you gamify that so that people could compete with one another in order to be greater tree planters? What can you do to drive awareness of Ecosia's ability to have a positive environmental impact?
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of things we can do. So we've been thinking about gamification, for example, or having little competitions where you could compete against your friends, for example. The problem is that we're competing against Google, and Google has I think more than 100,000 employees. We have 100 employees, so we have to be very careful about where we invest our resources. So this is one of the projects that we will hopefully get to at some point if we have more people working for us. But at the moment, the little counter is basically what we offer people to give an indication on what the contribution is. But I think what is even more impressive than the personal counter that everybody has is that total counter. So where our kind of combined impact of all Ecosia users, and that is the more than 140 million trees. That is something that I'm also, so whenever I open Ecosia, I sometimes just look at this counter and look at the number going up because this is really impressive. So every second, just adding one tree, that is something that really motivates me, and that also everybody who's part of this basically cares a lot about. How can we, as a community, basically reforest our planet?
I find I spend some time looking at that number going up. It's gratifying. It just feels good to watch it happen. The other thing that people are generally concerned about when they're doing a search is their privacy. How does Ecosia address privacy issues, and what are you doing to protect a visitor's search history? Yeah,
so we're actually a private search engine, but this is we're not perceived that much as a private search engine because we're also planting trees. But privacy is super important for us. We just store very little information, like for example, how many searches you've done, so that we can tell you how many trees you've planted or your settings. But on top of that, there's basically nothing that we store about your personal searches, for example. So we're not creating any personal profiles other than our competitors. They're doing that and also selling or reusing a lot of that information. So basically at Ecosia, after a few days, everything will be anonymized and we don't know anything about you. And also this information then just it's impossible to basically connect the searches you've done to any individual afterwards. And so privacy is super important. This was also a decision that we made because a lot of people, including myself at Ecosia, deeply care about privacy, and we want to also be there in that area, be a good alternative to the big tech companies.
Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is the notion of using the social enterprise approach to organizing technology businesses. I'm curious if you think whether or not adopting a social benefit mission might fix a lot of the problems we have with technology generally, such as the negative social impacts of social media. Why is it the right structure for an organization of the future as compared to a company of the past?
Yeah, I think we're at the point where there's a transitioning happening from a destructive economy that has basically exploited our planet for a few centuries towards a regenerative economy that is trying to fix things and actually make things better again. And for me, that then also reflects in the way how we do business or what kind of businesses people want to work for. And I think we're one of the leading regenerative businesses that actually really have a positive impact on the planet. And at the moment, the big companies often are still destructive companies. So if you look at the bottom line, what their effect is, it's still rather negative. But I think there will really be an evolution, especially if we get further into the climate crisis. Then it will be more and more important that companies really do everything that they can to solve this crisis. And the climate crisis is not the only crisis. So, and I think consumers won't really be eager to support companies that don't really have a positive impact. I think employees also don't really want to work anymore for a company that doesn't have a really positive impact. So I think there's really a dramatic change happening. It might take a few decades, but I see this especially with younger people now in Germany, that they're like, for them, it's much, much more important to contribute to something meaningful than earning a few $1,000 extra every year.
So in terms of the transparency required in order for people to begin to make good choices about which companies to give their business to, the benefit corporation is required to share a lot more information than a traditionally organized company. What should tech be sharing with visitors to their sites to tell them the impact, environmental and socioeconomic, of their activity?
Yeah. So I think in terms of privacy, there's a lot of things that users just don't understand what's basically happening with their data in the background. So being transparent, if some of the companies were really transparent about that, they should show a big warning message, I think. Yeah. So I think that is super important. Then, of course, the environmental impact. So if you're streaming video, as you said, streaming that in 4K or even 8K is that's a lot of data, and maybe HD is enough or good enough, and it would reduce really your footprint quite a lot. But then I think what I personally find also very important, and that is for me a key aspect of Ecosia as well, is who does this company ultimately belong to, and what is the ultimate purpose of this company? At Ecosia, we have a very special model where our company is basically owned by a foundation. So it is impossible to sell the company, and it's impossible to extract any profits from the company. And that means that all the profit that we generate will eventually go into climate action. That is radically different if you compare that to all of the tech companies who are eventually owned by shareholders and that need to make a profit. So if you ask what is the purpose of that company, then the purpose of that company is to make shareholders more wealthy. So, and if you see that that is the core difference between us and our competitors, and if you see that difference, then as a consumer you can decide, okay, what kind of company do I want to support, and what kind of world do I want to live in? Do I want to live in a world where everything is just based on profit maximization, or are there maybe deeper purposes that I want to support? So, and I think that transparency isn't really there at the moment. Like often people don't really think about this, even though I think personally it's super important. And there's good reason why tech companies are not putting that on their homepage, because I think if people really look deeper into that, they wouldn't really like it so much.
So where do you see Ecosia in 2030? How many trees will you have planted by then?
Yeah, so I personally hope that, more and more people are starting to use us. So I hope that by then we will have not only hundreds of millions, but potentially billions of people using us. And that means that we could really significantly help solve the problem of climate change. But to be honest, for me, it's more important that we as a society, we start really to act and really to make good steps forward in solving climate change. And the main lever that we have to actually take CO2 out of the atmosphere. So there are a lot of things that we can do to reduce our emissions, renewable energy, flying less, electric cars, those kind of things. But if you look at how can we actually fix the problem that we've created, then planting trees and changing the way we produce food, those are actually two big levers. And what I want to contribute to, or what we at Ecosia want to contribute to, is that tree planting is really seen as one of the big solutions that we have to solve climate change. And that is also done well, because there's a lot of tree planting that isn't really done well at the moment. And if we achieve that, then I think tree planting can really be the missing puzzle piece to actually solve this climate crisis. Because the CO2 emission reductions aren't really happening fast enough.
Right.
So we need some kind of a miracle. And I think tree planting can be that miracle. And at the same time, it also helps to solve so many other problems. People not having good access to food, the biodiversity crisis, and so on. So I think this can really be, tree planting can be our miracle tool to solve so many problems that we have on our planet at the moment.
So one of the things as you're talking that occurs to me is that search can be part of the solution, because search can relate information and present it to the user in a way that says, oh, you're looking for this. Did you know that this is the impact and this is a way to offset it? Have you thought about how, and I would be happy to see some of the money you're spending on tree profit in the future go into surfacing that information, by the way. In fact, I would be pleased to see that. It would, I think, lead to more trees planted because people would be spurred to action. Have you thought about how to use Ecosia as a guide to living sustainably?
Yeah, we're actually already doing this in small ways. And we're also, this is one area that we really want to invest more in, that really help people to make those more, let's say, those greener choices.
Such as, how do you do that? What do you do today?
Yeah, so at the moment, for example, if there's a specifically green company, then we have a little leaf right next to their search results, so to their listing. And so you see that this company is better than others. So if you're looking for a jacket, for example, then Patagonia would have a little green leaf around their key result, their search result, and others wouldn't. So that helps. And then we also even highlight the very, very bad actors, like fossil fuel companies that are really making our world a worse place. They get a little coal icon right next to their search result. Okay. And this is, for now, this is a pretty basic solution, but there are other things that we're already developing that really helps people, especially with the big decisions. Like if you're thinking about taking a flight, that's one of the worst things that you as an individual could do. Then we at least could inform you about the consequences, the kind of climate impact of doing that. And yeah, maybe a few people then decide differently. Maybe instead of flying to somewhere very far away, instead take vacation. Maybe.
Well, the ease of access of information is, it gives you the impression everything is easy, and in fact, there are costs and consequences that we aren't recognizing. It's fascinating to think about how search could become part of the informational weaponry we need in order to respond to the climate crisis. Christian, I want to thank you for taking time to talk with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I hope you come back soon and share more of the story as it evolves. We've been talking with Christian-Kroll. He's the founder of Ecosia, and you can find Ecosia, the search engine that plants trees, at ecosia.org. That's ECOSIA.org. Do check it out, folks. It's a great search engine, and it's a fantastic way to do something good for the world while you're using your computer. We're going to be back soon with another innovator interview, but in the meantime, I hope you'll take a few minutes to share this podcast as well as all the others that we've done, more than 260 now, with your friends, your family, people that you meet on the street. Let's get people thinking about the opportunity to make positive changes for the planet. This is Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. I am Mitch Ratcliffe, your host. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.